I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, Small Business Advanced Tax Planning and Compliance Extraordinaire, and this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide. Today, we're going to welcome to the podcast Eric Brotman. Is that right?
Okay. It was.
Brotman.
So far, so good. You
All
nailed
right.
it. You're a real pro at this.
Eric is the CFP, AEP, CPWA, and is the Chief Executive Officer of BFG Financial Advisors. That is a lot of credentials. An independent firm assisting clients with wealth creation, preservation, and distribution. Eric has over 25 years of experience in financial planning and founded the firm in Baltimore in 2003. I've never been to Baltimore.
It's lovely.
I want to.
But nicer in the spring and fall than in the summer and winter.
Yeah, that's on my list of places to go in that time frame. I think everywhere is better in spring and the fall, though, quite honestly.
Just about. Except Arizona. It's still too hot in the spring and fall there.
Yeah, I prefer Colorado in the spring and the fall. So pretty much everywhere. BFG provides investment, retirement, estate insurance, and comprehensive financial planning services for families, professionals, executives, and business owners. And then we're going to move down to this next part. Eric is the host of the Don't Retire Graduate podcast, dedicated to teaching listeners how to advance into retirement rather than retreating
Shameless plug.
into it. I'm getting there right in just a second. Every episode provides listeners with inspiration and actionable advice to guide each of them towards a seamless transition into a dignified retirement. His new book, Don't Retire Graduate, is published. This one says due to be published.
I know you're reading
published.
You're reading an old bio.
I know this is like June's bio. I think we talked months ago
originally.
We did.
You don't have to go through all of that.
I'm not going to.
If you want to just have me introduce myself. That was
the last part. You can tell me the rest of it later.
I mean, dear
I'll ask
God,
about that later.
All the credentialing and all the nonsense. Let's just talk shop and have some fun. Seriously. I'm not formal, and we're going to have some fun,
totally cool.
And your listeners will, I hope, love this and don't.
Yeah, I got lots of good questions for you.
Cool. I'm ready.
So first things
first. I'm a Capricorn.
Oh.
When are you, did you already start the recording on this show? Is this actually the show?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Oh, gosh. All right. Fine. I thought you were rehearsing. No, that's fine.
What was your first job?
My first real job was at Burger King at 14. Where I made it your way. Mm-hmm. And, I got a real experience when minimum wage moved from $2.85 an hour to $3.35 an hour. I worked 20 hours a week and made $66 a week. Flipping burgers, wearing polyester.
At 14.
At 14. Walk to work.
Yeah.
I had already done the lawn mowing and the snow shoveling and all that kind of stuff. I don't count that exactly, but I just wish Roth IRAs had existed.
Well,
because I'd have funded them.
But you did some of the entrepreneurial stuff first.
I did. I definitely did. And and then did Burger King. And then I had a ton of different internships in high school and college. I actually wanted to sort of figure out what I like to do and rule out the things that I didn't like to do.
That's what I want my kids to do. I'm going to be like, go intern with my friend there, and go intern with my friend there, and then you could just go intern with daddy. And what do you like? Yeah,
no, that's absolutely right. And to me, figuring out what I didn't want to be when I grew up was part of it. And, I think my daughter's 10, and what I tell her all the time is not to grow up because adulting's a trap.
Yeah. so tell mine too.
Honestly,
same age.
I was like, don't do it. It's grossly overrated. Mm-hmm. And yet she's still barreling toward 11. It's not okay.
No, mine are 12 and 10. So
that's scary.
I feel you. My 12-year-old is about 5'10", 140 pounds, wears a men's size 12 shoe. He's huge. And I forget he's 12 because he looks so huge. But my 10-year-old is still like the proper size.
Proper size. You're saying your eldest is improperly sized?
He is. He's gigantic. He got some kind of
there's
mutant.
a scholarship waiting now.
He's not sportsy at all. He's the antithesis of sportsy.
Best practice, because if he can't dunk.
I keep telling him, I said, people are going to ask you if you play basketball all the time. I said, you just tell them you like putt-putt.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. People ask if I golf, and I say I do, but I always have to avoid the spinning surfboard.
Exactly.
It gets me every time.
I know. So give us the rundown on your career journey.
Well, like I said, I flipped burgers and did some different things. Worked as a stock boy in a clothing store, climbing ladders and counting inventory with tick marks. Honest to God, crazy. I got did some internships. I worked in college for a newspaper, actually selling advertising. So I got some sales opportunity there and got to meet business owners and work with people and create campaigns, which was very, very cool. My first real job out of college was at Legg Mason. I was in the legal department of a brokerage firm because, here I am doing finance now 26, 27 years, and I'm an English major and I studied English and psychology because, like you, trying to figure out what you wanted to major in at Cal State, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I studied late 18th century romantic poetry. Wow. I can't tell you how infrequently that comes in handy. But I enjoyed it, and now I've written 3 books. So I'm using the English major, right?
There you go.
And quite frankly, believe in behavioral finance. So I believe I'm using the psychology piece of this too. So I think it's come full circle. But I was at Legg Mason and I was in the legal department and I was planning to go to law school like English majors do.
Yeah, like they do.
I fell in love with the brokerage business. I fell in love with the financial and investment world and fell out of love with the legal profession. And I mean, I took the LSATs twice. I applied to school. I got into school. I paid a deposit at school and I didn't go. Like I ate a deposit for law school.
Yikes.
When I said, it's just not my path. This is not what I want to be. And I thank my stars for that every day.
Right.
I do. It would have been a great education, but I don't know that many happy lawyers.
Yeah.
They're not happy.
Yeah. I, at one point thought I really wanted to be an auditor. I loved my auditing classes. Those are the classes I loved so much. Yeah. I'm so grateful I never got an auditing job.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do like to count beans. That's part of your thing.
I do, but I like tax beans. I like creating change for people through tax savings. Like you don't really get to do that with audit.
No, you don't. And I could use all the tax savings I can get. So I'm glad we're having this talk.
We all can.
I'm going to get some free tax advice from you today.
Okay, you can try.
So Legg was the only time I ever worked for anyone because I got a real taste of the corporate world. And it wasn't for me. The head of operations of this brokerage firm that was Baltimore was the home office at the time. It's still the home office, but came in, and he was this caricature of what you picture in a financial world. He was 6 foot something, Frankenstein sized, blue suit, white shirt, red tie, perfect shoes, dark, deep voice. Came in, and he said, all of you around the table, this is new employee orientation. He says, all of you just paid lots of money to go to school. You're going to learn more here in 6 months than you learned 4 years of college, and you should be paying us for the opportunity to be here. And that's the last I want to talk about salaries. And I was like, I feel important. Not welcome to the team. We're glad you're here. I mean, this was the early 90s. And at that point, it was still okay to say, pack up your desk and leave. Today, people are a little more sensitive. But, the reality was it was an awful, awful introduction.
You're just a cog.
Yeah. And I was in a department with 5 people in the legal transfer department. And after I had been there for 8 months, I had seniority. Turnover was almost 100%.
No.
Because it was an awful job.
Ugh.
It paid nothing. It paid nothing at all. And it was an awful job. And when people left the department, I said to my then supervisor, who I actually really liked, I thought she was amazing and a great boss, actually. And I said to her, I said, I can do the work of 2 people in this department. Pay me 50% more. So I can afford cream cheese on a bagel in the morning with breakfast,
Little lox, maybe.
I mean, I couldn't pay rent. No lox. Just all I wanted was cream cheese. I had to get a roommate. Rent was $600 a month and I needed a roommate. But at the end of the day, she said, I can't do that. Corporate policy, yada, yada. And I quit the day of my first raise because it was so pitiful. I said, I can't live on this. Yeah, I qualified for assistance with the gas and electric company as a full-time employee at a terrific firm. And basically they looked at it as, you're continuing your education. We don't have to pay you anything. You're just lucky to be here.
That's so wrong.
And that was, so now you fast forward, and I went to work for an insurance company. I spent 5 years learning, getting lots of education, doing my alphabet soup. My bio is a ridiculous soup of alphabet. It's like 10, I have like 10 acronyms.
More than I do.
And most of them I don't even use. They don't matter. It was just a chance for me to educate myself because I had a lot going for me at 22. I looked 12 and I had an English degree, and I was going to come give financial advice to people 2 and 3 times my age who had seen things I couldn't fathom. What could go wrong?
I was 23, tax manager, mid-sized firm, walking into businesses, and they're looking at me like, where did you come from, little girl?
Right. Is it bring your daughter to work?
And they would kind of come at me, and then they would realize I'm not a little girl. Never have been.
Fair enough. I actually went the other way and played the you could be my grandparents card. Let's do business. But at any rate, I spent 5 years there, and I got my education. And when I finally did the CFP and got the certified financial practitioner piece, I said, okay, I want to do financial planning. And I worked for an insurance company. You can't do financial planning in an insurance company. You specifically couldn't then. It's still hard. We had a broker dealer with 1 employee. Her name was Nancy. And when Nancy went to lunch, the broker dealer was closed. You can't make this up. This God's honest truth.
I think it's still true.
Well, maybe. When Nancy went to lunch, we all just stopped working. So I had to leave the firm, and I was introduced to somebody who was almost 10 years ahead of me in the business. And he was looking for some sweat equity. He had venture capital. He had plenty of money, but not enough time. And I had plenty of time and not enough money. So we started a firm in 1999, or we came together in 99, and it was brilliant. So you know your history, I presume. We did pro formas, and we hired all these advisors, and we were ready. We were starting a company. We took on space, and we furnished it, and we hired people, and we launched March 29th, 2000.
Oof.
Okay. 5 days after the market peaked, when the tech bubble exploded. And that was our launch point. That's where we started. And it was a lesson in tenacity that I will never forget. I don't know that I've ever worked that much or that hard for that little, but it was we were building something. Yeah. And, 4 years later, the firm I was working with merged with another company. And they were really looking to work with only very high net worth folks. And I really liked working with mass affluent, but lots of people. And it became an opportunity for me to start on my own. And so I wouldn't call it a divorce. We're all good friends. I graduated from that, and I helped him launch, and then I got to do it, and I got to build a firm. I was 31 years old. I was 31. I was divorced. I had no kids. It was time to take a risk, and I borrowed money from everywhere and started a company.
I love it.
And it was an awesome experience. And, now we're still here, and we're 21 employees in 3 states, and manage almost $500 million for families all over the U.S. And it's gratifying, and I'm having more fun. I've launched a consulting firm. I've launched a media company. Like we're doing some really fun things, and writing books, and doing podcasts, and blogging, and I'm just having a ball.
I know. Isn't it fun?
I couldn't have scripted this any better, so I wrote this book called Don't Retire, Graduate, with the idea that retirement is horrible for us and none of us should do it. That
was my next question. So just go ahead.
Well, Jamie, I'm reading your mind.
I know.
Right now. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Do you feel what's happening?
You're like right here.
I think retirement's a horrible idea. This idea that you work, that you get your education, and you build your credentials, and you build your experience, and you work for 35, 40, 45 years to become idle.
Obsolete.
And to disappear and retreat, and to have your LinkedIn page say, I'm retired, I do nothing, and to sit on the beach.
Yeah. Does that really happen though?
Well, it does.
Actually do that?
Well, no, most people actually sit on the couch, eat potato chips, watch Oprah, and hope
for like 6
shuffleboard.
months, right?
It's so boring. People don't
thrive. I can't imagine.
No, they don't thrive.
I don't know what I do.
Well, you would not thrive.
I'd sit on the beach for a couple of weeks and then I'd be like, okay, now what's next? Let's go build something else.
See, if you do it right, you sit on the beach for a couple of weeks every year without giving up your career.
Right.
Surround yourself with amazing people who are okay with you going to the beach for a few weeks and go. But I never want to quit this. This is fun. As long as I am physically able, which I believe is for the long term, I hope I'm taking care of myself. And as long as I am, I'm cognitively functional, which, my daughter might say I'm not all the time, but I think I am.
That's their job.
I want to do this for as long as I can.
Yeah. So let's talk about how retirement has changed. So that was really kind of my next question is, I know that like the history of retirement is really like you work till you're 65 and then they give you a party and then like you die like 2 years later.
Actually, it's almost worse than that.
But that's not true anymore.
Well, the history of retirement, it actually started many, many, many years ago. But in the sort of modern world, retirement was started in the 1860s by Otto von Bismarck, who said that one should be happy with the retirement they are dismissed into. Truly, it was like punishment. It was like, go away.
It's like you're an obsolete cog. We are retiring you.
Go away. We've got a younger model. Okay. And then, just here locally in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins is here. And some of the folks who, Osler, there's an Osler building here. And what this PhD said about aging at the time, this is many years ago, he said that, your ages of prosperity and usefulness are from 20 to 40.
Oh, well, I'm out.
From 40 to, me too. From 40 to 60, you're tolerable.
Oh.
And after 60, you're basically useless. So I'm glad I'm still tolerable. I suspect you are too.
Pretty tolerable.
I'm mostly tolerable. And so then you go to Social Security. Jamie, think about Social Security.
There's nothing there.
Well, true, because the trust fund isn't a trust fund. But I digress. Let's not go there.
We're not even going to go there.
But when Social Security was created, people entered the workforce at 18.
Yeah.
Because most of them didn't go to college. You got out of high school. You
actually get jobs and,
So there were jobs. And you could get a job with a high school degree. Because years ago in high school.
And buy a house.
Well, years ago in high school, they were translating Latin into Greek. Now they're learning not to eat Tide Pods. Like, how does that happen? So
I don't know.
It's alarming. But at any rate, so you entered the workforce at 18. You retired at 65. And you were dead at 70.
Yeah.
Today, we don't enter the workforce till 22, 25. Heck, if it's med school, you might be 30. Oh, by the way, you're not entering at zero. You're entering at negative 85 grand because of your student loans.
At least.
You want to retire at 55 and could live to be 107.
Right.
What are you going to do? Even if you retire at 70, what are you going to do from what might be 20 or 30 years?
I know. That's what boggles my mind right now. My grandmother, my last living grandparent, just died 2 years ago. She was 98. All my other grandparents lived pretty long too. So that means, and they're saying now that there's already going to be a bunch of people that are going to live until 110 that they've all been born. Well, could be me. It could be you. It could be.
It's not going to be. It's not going to be the two of us. We grew up in an era where we did bad things, and it's not going to happen. But our kids are growing up in an era where people are being more health conscious. They're being more organic. They're thinking about things in different ways, and they could live well into. I mean, I never exercised as a kid. I played some sports, but not well.
My mom is 70, and she does the bookkeeping for all of our clients.
That's great. That's
on
wonderful.
QBO, something that I know that plenty of people in my own freaking industry can't learn.
I hate QBO.
Oh my gosh, QBO is the best. We'll have to have this conversation.
I want to punch whoever came up with that in the throat. Because,
oh my gosh, it's amazing.
No, there was great software, and that is not it. They ruined a very good piece of software,
QBO,
in my opinion.
You'll have to try it again. I'll have to walk you through it.
All right, you're on. We'll do that over. We'll do it over Captain and Ginger. That was fine.
Just the one.
Well, yeah, one Captain and Ginger.
Yeah. We established before the podcast that Eric can't have more than one.
No, that's Scotch.
Scotch. It's Scotch.
No. I'm not drinking Scotch and doing QBO with you. It's not going to happen. Not doing it.
You'll just get real mad at me.
Yeah, feisty.
That's hilarious.
It's not worth it.
So what are some of the key differences in how each generation is approaching financial planning right now?
Well, let's start with the remaining members of the greatest generation, because they're octogenarians.
Yeah. So what
And
is, so how old are they? So what is that age?
I don't know what
I
I
actually
don't
don't know
know
that
the
one.
aging band, but that's the folks who were the boomers' parents.
Mm-hmm.
Some of whom are still out there, and they're in their 80s and 90s. I mean, these are older people, but
Mm-hmm.
For them, retirement was still mostly pensions and Social Security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, they weren't required to put together much of a nest egg.
Yeah. My husband's grandparents all have pensions.
Pensions are rare now, unless you're in the public service. If you're in private industry,
They were
it's
also
basically gone.
public service. Yeah.
So if your government employees do have that in most places, so they approached it very differently. That was more along the lines of, we're going to get our pension, we're not going to live that long. The ones who are still living, I think most of them are surprised they're still here.
Mm-hmm.
My father's in his early 80s, and he's already like, he's halfway to heaven already. I mean, God love him. He's already like, I've picked out my spot.
He's like, I'm good.
I'm going to go. He's like, I've done it. I'm going to go see my parents. Okay.
Yeah. I love that though.
But the boomers were ready to retire when 08 hit.
Mm-hmm.
And it scared them.
Mm-hmm.
It scared them badly, because some of them did better than others. Clearly, they had better strategies, better whatever. But boomers don't want to give up their incomes.
Mm-hmm.
They're spenders. They like to dine out, and they like to travel, and they want to have their lifestyle, and they're not excited to retire, and they're not sure they can afford to retire anyway. So that's why there are no jobs for the next couple of generations, because people aren't leaving the workforce.
They very much like to hold on to their happy things.
Well, because they don't have a plan for after they work that is a life plan. Forget the financials.
Right.
They could have all the money in the world. If they don't know what they're going to do Jamie, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't really know yet.
And don't do it. It's a trap.
I don't want to.
So no, don't ever grow up. So now Gen X, I presume you're a Gen Xer like me.
I'm a cusper. I'm right on that Gen X millennial.
No, we need you. Come to our side, because you
want to.
No, you grew up with Reality Bites and The Breakfast Club and John Hughes movies. I know you did.
So I was born in 1980. So we're like there's like a micro generation there between the Xers and the millennials. They call them the Zennials. So we did Reality Bites and all that, but we also played Oregon Trail and had phones, like
that's fair.
In high school.
Yes, I finished college before email. So that does make us different. I did.
Yeah.
That makes us a slightly different generation.
That is totally different generation. We had AOL, like instant messenger and stuff.
Oh no, instant messenger.
I played like games on like this old brick Apple computer when I was younger. So it's very interesting how, like, I always say I'm like late gen, early millennial, because I really have like definitely both. Like, I'm a hard worker, but also like work-life balance, right? My husband was born 25 days before me, and he's literally a boomer.
Okay, so he's aged more than his years.
His mentality is just very different.
Okay.
It's really funny.
Millennials are the first generation. Xers, by the way, let's go back to Xers. Xers are I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on your podcast. Xers are they're kind of pissed off.
Yeah, we don't. They're kind of forgotten.
Xers are feeling. First of all, we're a tiny generation, so we'll never have political pull. We're going to do whatever the boomers want, and then we're going to do whatever the millennials want, and we're not going to ever have a vote or a say in anything. So that gives us a chip on our shoulder. Beyond that, we were the last generation who were sold a bill of goods that there was a track that you had to run on, and it was the boomers' track. Millennials know better.
We're pissed. I'm pretty pissed about that a lot of the time.
I mean, you should be pissed, but millennials coined the side hustle. They figured out that you were a free agent. They said, pensions, what are you kidding? I might not even invest in my 401k match. And millennials jump, they job jump, they move to different places. They're not buying homes in the same way. And millennials aren't kids. Millennials are in their 30s. They're buying homes and they have kids.
Late 30s.
So I still think of millennials as mostly children, which just shows that I've got a little boomer in me too, I realize. But millennials have figured it out. And I don't believe at all in work-life balance. I don't think it exists. I think aspiring for it is a fallacy. I think work-life integration exists.
My
But I think,
friend Stephen Crawford calls it work-life synergy.
okay. So
I like
same,
integration too. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that balance doesn't exist. It's not like you're going to be one thing one day and one thing the other. In fact, if anything, you're a professional, a podcaster, a mom, a wife, a daughter, whatever. Like you've got 10 roles, 20 roles. And it's not like you're going to be like, well, today I'm going to be a CPA, but tomorrow, all mom all the time.
Yeah, right. No.
Like you're a CPA who might have to do some momming, and then a mom who might have to do some CPAing, and you get it.
Yeah.
So that's the millennials. Now, Z's are an interesting bunch.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How old are
Z's are like 25 and under.
I was going to say they're coming up on 20s, mid-20s now.
But Z's,
a bunch of my cousins are Z's.
Z's will be the last generation, in my opinion, to take student loans.
Yep.
They're
going to know better. Yep.
They're going to say, you know what, I do not have to go to college in order to get to start a career, number one, because people care more about what I know, what I'm made of, and who I know than they do what diploma I have on my wall.
Absolutely.
And they're also, at the same time, they're not only are they going to not take student loans on, I actually think that they're going to be more aware, even than the millennials, of their space. Like you could forget the McMansions; they're done. These little tiny houses are happening, and this idea that we don't need a ton of space, and that it's better to be. It's like the FIRE movement, right? It is better to be financially independent and not take on all that stuff.
And not
the extras were sold that it was first it was the college, and then it was career, and then it was
a car,
and then it was a spouse,
and the house, and the dog, and the
right 2.3 kids, a dog, and a fence, and that was going to be.
We had that. We had 2 kids, golden retriever.
I was thinking bulldog myself, but no, whatever. So, but that was the thing. It was the white picket fence. Well, I don't know any Z's who are looking for that. In fact, what they really want is to be learning, to be growing, to be appreciated, to be respected. And so millennials, when you think about it, are this interesting combination of Xers and Z's.
Isn't that funny how it's kind of like we all kind of took different bits from, how things have changed over the years?
My daughter grew up in a completely different era, clearly, than I did. I mean, I was 38 when I became a dad, first of all. So that I was a little bit older as a parent. But, I remember when she was no more than 3 or 4 years old, she came into my office and she was touching my monitor. She couldn't understand why it wasn't moving.
Yep, might have done that too.
Like, what's a mouse? Something so simple as that I never thought of. To them, she whips around on the iPad. She puts me to shame.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does this thing work? It's like, I can still program a VHS if I have to.
Right.
So the generational thing is interesting, but the pendulum has swung from a work-life balance concept to a work-life integration concept. And I think now we're actually going to see seasons of life in a different way. I think people are going to be much more likely to take a year off and travel when they're 35 than they ever used to, because they couldn't.
I love it.
I think people are going to say, I'm going to work 6 months this year, or I'm going to take on only certain projects, or, I'm going to do this for these 5 or 10 years, and then I'm going to change careers entirely.
Yeah. And I think what I love, we're actually in the middle of putting out a job posting for a firm manager for us. And
I'll take it.
And my VI, Emily, and I were looking at this, and she she has an HR degree, and she's like, education requirements. And I was like, just take it off. I hate that. Like, I don't care if they have a degree. Like, we're looking for somebody with specific strengths, specific desires. Like, they're going to have to want to work here. They're going to have to do what I need them to do. Like, it's going to have to be a good fit culturally. Grit. Yes. Grit. Absolutely. Perseverance, independence, like, those are all. But
also charisma and kindness and empathy. And
and that's all.
Be a good human.
Yeah. And the rest of it's just like, learn how our apps work and tell me that I have too many. Like, your job is going to be to call me out on this shit. Right. So you have to have at least a strong enough personality to deal with me, which is going to be kind of hard to find, but
I'm having trouble with it already.
I don't care what your education requirement. I don't care what your education is.
I think that's not uncommon now.
Yeah. And I think
this
it's
whole
important.
idea that you have to have this degree from now there are certain fields where it will help to have. I mean, if you're an MIT grad and you're an engineer, there's certain fields where that's still going to be pedigreed. I'm sorry, but that's still going to be pedigreed.
They're not my clients.
Understood. Architects and engineers, but it is changing, and it's changing for the better. By the way, I think so too. It's changing for the better. This idea, the greatest generation, and even a lot of the boomers, worked for the same company for 30 years. They wore the same hard hat for 30 years. They got their pension, their gold watch, and they rode off in the sunset. That doesn't exist anymore, and I wouldn't have wanted that.
It doesn't exist anymore. Even in these bigger corporations, they don't even have that anymore. We're like excited for a 401k match.
Yes. Yes. Well, yes. And and more people are working for small employers, and their small businesses are popping up. And, COVID has changed the landscape a lot. And I don't think we can, underscore how much we don't know yet about what that's done to small business, what it's done to families, what it's done, the K-shaped recovery that has begun and that will continue made the haves have more and the have-nots have less. And it will create some issues. And that's not to opine politically. It's just to recognize that there are going to be people who were already one paycheck from oblivion who are now 4 months behind on rent.
Yeah. That's the real worry there.
It's a problem. There is an oblivion point from which you can't recover, or it's almost impossible to recover. And I think making sure that we keep people from that, but we don't do it in a way that's irresponsible.
Right.
Because we have clients who own rental homes and who have tenants who haven't paid rent in months. And while I empathize with the tenant who can't pay rent, I also empathize with the owner of the building who's paying mortgages and not collecting rent. No one's winning on this deal.
Nope, absolutely not. I know there's a lot of but it's like nobody wins in this situation.
No, it's destroying everyone's credit. It's destroying a lot of family trajectories.
Yeah, it's destroying cash flows.
Well,
it's destroying a lot of things.
And in the generation before mine, it was very common to have a married couple with kids and one job in the house.
Can't do that anymore.
Can't do that anymore. Well, but now I'm not even sure you can do 2 jobs in the house.
No.
Because now you've got mom and dad are both working, plus one of them's got a side hustle or a business, or they're doing something else. Like, it takes 3 jobs now. And that can't be a good thing.
It's not sustainable.
Well, if it is, the stress level. I mean, the reason why all humanity is popping Xanax is because we are doing this to ourselves. Like at some point, when is enough enough? And how much of it is keeping up with the Joneses? How much of it is because of what you're seeing on TV or or whatever? And how much of it is just life got expensive?
Yeah, it is expensive.
I mean, have you put a roof on your house lately?
No, thank goodness.
It's ugly.
We had the house painted.
Well, and even that, but anything, if you own a home, there's a whole generation of people who don't want to own homes, and I get it.
Oh, I'm with them. I tell people all the time, why do you want to own?
And
find an awesome, but the problem is landlords aren't a whole lot better sometimes. So
it's true, but you don't have to own as much as you can possibly afford.
Yeah. And I think that's part of our problem. We just kind of kept upgrading, but not by a ton, just a little bit. But now we're in this house. It's just okay, we're going to be here forever. First of all, because you can't afford a home here in Colorado. There's no way we could sell this house and buy something else at this point.
That's another thing that COVID's doing.
Yeah.
Is it's creating a mass migration from some of the big cities. And a lot of those are the New York and California cities where there's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they're going to Wyoming and Idaho and Colorado and Arizona, and they're buying up the real estate and paying cash for it. And they're rising the market. And that means people who live there can't afford to, or who work there can't afford to live there. And there's a ripple effect that's coming that is, it's really hard to predict. None of us have seen it before in our lifetimes, and I hope we never see it again, but it'll be something different next time.
It's really interesting. Yeah. We've talked about moving somewhere, lower cost of living.
Well, I mean, you could retire in Tennessee. It's lovely
It's
and it's
not
very
even that much
inexpensive.
cheaper
Oh, it is.
anymore.
No, I think it
We were
is.
looking at Chattanooga.
Yeah. Chattanooga's not expensive.
It's not.
And
But a
it's a
lot of people
great,
are moving there.
well, so get there
I think,
early, get
I
there
think Gary
often.
V is there.
Well, it is there's a migration from big cities to smaller towns. Yeah, it's going to affect not only the financials of those areas, but it's going to affect the politics.
I was going to say it's going to be a huge political shift into
And
those
it's
small towns.
and there will, yes. And you look at a town like Jackson, Wyoming. Jackson, Wyoming is one of the coolest places.
Jackson Hole, yeah, it is super
amazing.
cool.
I love Jackson Hole, but every house there is someone's second home. They're 7 figures plus.
That's how most of the mountains is here in Colorado.
Well, and so there, I believe. Well, yeah, same idea. I believe that, and I could be wrong. So for anyone listening from Wyoming, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there are rules that if you're an employer there, you have to provide housing for your employees.
Yeah, they're just starting to do that in our resort towns.
They can't afford to live there. They have no shot. And if they have to commute an hour and a half, that's a distance. So what do you do when you don't have a workforce? You either have to do what Google did, which is bus them from San Francisco, right? Or you have to do the small town. You put them up in what is functionally a hotel for your employees.
It's crazy.
That's bizarre.
That's bizarre. It is bizarre. Actually, I remember somebody talking about them doing that in Aspen, Colorado.
Wouldn't surprise me.
They couldn't, there was no place to live for anybody who works there. Or you've got like 6 people in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Right.
But I always say, like, how are the kids ever going to move out?
Well,
where are they going to go?
The kids don't live there.
No, my kids
don't. Oh, your kid. Well, yeah, no, they're going to stay with you forever too.
Yeah, because there's going to be nowhere to go.
But they'll take such good care of you. No, they're going to go to Chattanooga.
Yeah, maybe.
Or they're going to be in Georgia somewhere because it's less expensive. And there's this migration not only because of COVID and the cities and the population density. There's also tax-related migration. So from Baltimore, there's a one-way pipeline to Naples, Florida.
That makes sense.
One way because it's on the Gulf. It's beautiful. It's not hideously expensive. It's expensive, but it's not Aspen expensive.
Yeah.
And that's where people go, and they go because they can live and work in a place with abnormally high incomes, and then and take tax deductions for their 401ks, and then they can go retire someplace where they don't have to pay taxes at the state level on their 401ks.
Yeah.
So it's tax arbitrage. We've had clients who have moved from their homes in Maryland to Boca and gotten condos on the beach, and the condo is cheaper than just the state income tax they were paying here.
It's crazy.
It's like getting a free house to leave and go someplace sunny with a beach.
I'm in.
Well, we'll go together, Jamie. I'm ready.
I'm in. It's crazy.
Our kids will get along, don't you think? No,
well, we have clients that moved to Nevada. That work remotely. For companies in California that live in Nevada.
Oregon too. Idaho.
Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming.
It's being able to work from anywhere and relying less on airports and relying less on proximity. Think of the good things that'll come out of this. First of all, for a business owner, you can hire talent anyway. We now have 2 employees in Texas and 1 in Utah.
Yep. I have 1 here in Colorado, 1 in Kansas, and then I don't know where this other one's going to be.
Maryland. I told you I'm taking the job. I'm very expensive.
I'm sure you are.
but it doesn't matter where they live. If they can do the job, and if that's true, it's going to mean people don't necessarily have to go where the jobs are anymore. I mean, I went to school in Philadelphia, and I love the city. I love Philadelphia. But most of my fraternity brothers went directly to New York City and to Wall Street, and 14 of them were in the towers, and all of them got out, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Now, of course, we have a whole generation of people who don't remember 9/11 any more than you remember Kennedy.
Nope.
You know what I mean? I don't either. I mean, we've read about it, but John F. Kennedy, that's the same as Abraham Lincoln to us. It was in the history book. Well, 9/11 changed everything for an entire generation, and the new generation doesn't even think of it as anything. It might as well be the Alamo.
Well, maybe the pandemic is theirs.
And it is. And they're going to tell their kids and grandkids, well, but more theirs. They're going to be like, I spent my 5th grade year in my living room.
Yeah, no, really. That's really interesting.
And their kids are going to be like, what?
Right? What? And they'll be like, well, we always do.
Wait a minute. You're right. They're going to be like, you used to go to school? Weird. There was a place called school?
So let's talk about financial independence. What does that look like?
It looks like having enough either predictable income or enough assets that can create income for you to replace the lifestyle that you need or want without risking your principal. So in other words, it's getting to the point where your income is recurring and sustainable indefinitely so that you're truly independent. And, rules of thumb are a little dangerous. Rule of thumb like, the 4% withdrawal rule. Well, okay, it works until it doesn't.
Yeah, until there's no 4% left.
So that 4% is, let's use that as a barometer. What that means is that if you're used to living, let's say you and your husband are used to living on $120,000 a year. That's what you need to spend. That's what you need to live on. And you're going to retire today. How much money do you need to create $120,000 a year in income, 10 grand a month? And the answer lies in the 7 figures. Because for every $1 million you have at 4%, it pays you $40,000 a year. So if you need $120,000, you need $3 million of working assets. All right. So now fast forward, you're making 120 today. You're going to retire in 25 years. Inflation is going to play a role, even though inflation's been modest. That's another thing. We got a whole generation doesn't remember inflation. But inflation will ultimately be in some sense abnormal. And so let's say inflation is, let's be modest. Let's say it's 3%. If inflation's 3%, the cost of everything doubles in 24 years. So if you're going to retire in 24 years, call it, that 120 today needs to be 240 then. That means you need $6 million as your nest egg. Wow. And Social Security was designed to pay a portion of that. So if you and your husband are each collecting $30,000 a year from Social Security, that's 60 of the 300. It's only 20% of what you would need to replace your lifestyle based on that math. That's crazy. So financial independence requires us to think about numbers that feel ridiculous. Because right now, if I said, Jamie, you got to have $6 million or you're not retiring, you might say, oh my gosh, that's all the money in the world. Or you might say, I have that in several accounts. I don't know you, but I don't. You don't. Okay.
Full disclosure, I don't.
Full disclosure, don't have $6 million. Fine.
Nope.
But the idea of $6 million to some people sounds like a complete impossibility. And to other people feel like, okay, how do we get there? And the way you get there is with time on your side. It's figuring out how much you have to put away with a reasonable rate of return over the X number of years you have to build that nest egg, and then treating that nest egg as an ATM of sorts. But rather than an ATM where you make withdrawals, think of it more like an orchard. You're picking fruit, and every year it'll bear new fruit. And as long as you don't chop branches off by taking excess withdrawals, you'll still have the same amount of fruit every year. And so the ATM model, I don't like. The orchard model makes sense to me. So financial independence is getting to a point where from all the different sources, you have enough wherewithal to never have to work again and can prepare for what could be a 30-year retirement. I mean, there's people who couldn't afford a 30-day vacation. How do you fund a 30-year retirement? And it's not easy. It's also not impossible. Yeah. But you need a co-pilot. I think it's important to have a financial advisor, an accountability partner, much like it's helpful to have a trainer at the gym. Right. Because they have to navigate all this. It's a lot, but it's not impossible. It's just not what people want to think about every day. The last thing you want to do, and I used to say, when you get home from work, no one goes to work. When I come out of this room and you come out of that room, and we're trying to have dinner together that's been delivered, but when you do that, the last thing you want to talk about is your retirement. Like, what are we going to do in 25 years? What are we going to do in 25 minutes? Right. What's tomorrow going to look like? Are we
days?
are we allowed to leave the house?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's real important to have a strategy, to have a teammate, to have to have open and incredibly transparent conversations with your spouse, but not without a moderator. The things married people fight about the most are kids and money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know.
And well, you're a married human, and that's why you fight about kids and money.
I'm also a tax preparer, and I get in the middle of some of this stuff sometimes on accident, not on purpose.
Yeah, no, I've learned when I have to take sides in those to always side with the wife.
Every time.
Every time, like, and I'll ask questions of a client. I'll be like, so how long do you plan to stay in the house? And the husband will be like, forever. And the wife will be like, 2-3 years. And I'll just look over. It happens all the time. I'll look over at him. I'll be like, you're going to need some boxes because you're packing.
Yeah, I sat down with a client once and I said, so, what are your long-term goals? Like, what do you guys want long-term? Because we can't tax plan without knowing where, what people want to do long-term. And she was like, yeah, I really just want to build this house on this piece of land. And she's like, had all these like very specific things. Like, it's going to be big enough for the kids to visit, but not stay very long. Like, she just had like this very specific, and he was just like, and I was like, people don't ask you this question very often.
They don't. Well, and so I ask people in the same way, what do you want to be when you grow up?
What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? Who do you want to be?
What do you want to solve?
We tie so much of our own self-worth and our own identity to what we do instead of who we are. That when people say, tell me about yourself, the first thing you're inclined to say is, I'm an accountant. Well, that's true, but that's not really who you are.
No.
That's your day job. And maybe it's more than a day job. It's a night job too. But my point is that if that's how you define yourself, how will you define yourself when your primary definition goes away? What are you going to say? Well, so tell me about yourself. Well, I used to be an accountant. Oh, nice talking to you.
It's always funny. It's funny when people are always like, well, I actually got an accounting degree. And I'm like, okay, we can talk then.
Yeah. We're going to understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That is interesting. The change in defining who we are by what we do to what impact we make or how we help people.
Just what we're about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really an interesting conversation.
Think of the roles that we all have, and the ones that matter are rarely where we hang our hat.
True.
They're usually how we interact with our kids, with our parents, with our friends and other family, with our employees or our coworkers or our bosses or anybody and all the relationships and all the people. And, to me, the financial planning to me is first of all, it needs to be available to everyone. There have to be resources for everyone to be able to get it, because financial literacy is the first step. If you can't read a bank statement, if you can't balance a checkbook or understand how credit works or basic building blocks, and we don't teach it in schools, if you can't do the basics, you can't possibly do the advanced stuff. If you didn't know what a balance sheet was, I'm not going to ask you about carried interest or basis. It just doesn't make sense. So how do we get people to learn some of the basics? And so the book is designed to do that. I've also, and I encourage you, if you check out lowtaxbook.com, I would love your opinion on this.
Okay.
I published an ebook. It's free, and it's about the 4 places where most Americans can put money where it's never taxed again.
Let's talk about those. That was me. I haven't. See, you just keep going to my next question.
Listen, like I said, I'm reading your mind. I'm all in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, do you know what they are?
Let's see. Roth IRAs.
Correct.
HSAs.
Correct.
Whole life policies.
Correct. Man, no one's ever gotten 3 before. If you get all 4.
I don't know the 4th one.
529s.
529 plans. Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
That's still big work.
I always forget.
That's actually 75% is C work, but still, it was a passing grade.
Yeah.
People only get 1 or 2. They're like Roth IRAs. Yeah. Roth 401ks. I'm like, it's the same thing. You can't. These are places where you can create real serious tax planning for yourself and for your family. And they all have specific rules and regs and all that. But if you go to lowtaxbook.com, you can download it for free. It is a blueprint on how to use those 4 strategies. I happen to think the HSA is the greatest thing ever created.
Agreed.
It is the perfect tax tool.
Agreed.
With, I guess the only exception I can come up with is that the contribution limit's too small. If it was bigger, it would be even more perfect, but it's still really great.
There's some ways we can get some more money in there sometimes,
I might need a new CPA.
depending on how you do your plans.
Well, ultimately figuring out ways to legally reduce income taxes, estate taxes, corporate taxes, whatever, it makes a difference because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Exactly.
It's what you can actually spend.
Yeah. It's what you can put back in your businesses. And that's why we do advanced planning for our clients. Cause it's like, I can save you, if I can save you money, you can put it in your business and you can pay people and you can build what you want to build and create more, jobs and wealth and take care of your people.
Or if you're no longer running a business and you're trying to get to that bogey for financial independence.
Yeah.
How much do you need? If what you need is gross, then your need for money is lower if it's not going to be taxable. So your lift is lighter.
Yeah. And I think, we'll just kind of finish here, but I always say I know enough about financial planning to be dangerous, but just that good mix of pre-tax and post-tax, because we just know that really the only place the tax rates can go right now is up.
Correct. Especially capital gains.
Yeah.
And estate tax too. But capital gains, I think, are low-hanging fruit. And if we lose the step up in basis, it's a game changer. Having the 10-year rule on the IRAs is gruesome. Gruesome. People don't understand what that's going to mean to their kids. But we got a lot of folks who are leaving money to their kids and they've worked their whole lives to build it. They don't want to take it because they don't want to pay taxes on it, but they're going to leave it to their kids who are in a tax bracket much higher than theirs, who have to take larger withdrawals.
Yeah. That's why Roths make a lot of sense.
Roths are spectacular for that reason.
Yeah. And I think, that mix of, I have people tell me all the time, I pay too much in taxes. And I'm like, your effective rate's like 13%. You're good.
Well, it's all of us think we pay too much.
Yes.
I have said before, and I maintain it is always better to have a tax problem than an income problem.
Yeah. I tell people
that doesn't make a tax problem any fun. It just means it's better to have enough abundance and enough income that you have to do some tax planning than it is to not have enough to do what you need to do.
Yes. And I always tell people, would you rather have the $100,000 and pay the 30% tax or not have the $100,000? Right? It's just like the whole PPP loan stuff we're working on.
Depends on the day. Oh yeah.
It does depend on the day, but
the PPP thing was giveth and taketh away. I mean, at the end of the day, folks were excited to receive it and it really did bandage them up. But next April, boy, are they going to pay the piper big time.
Yeah. I have a lot of things to say about the PPP loans.
I'll bet.
Yes.
We should do that over a bourbon.
That's a bourbon conversation. I think my only operative word for that is clusterfuck.
Well, that's the technical term, but you should not use jargon on your show. If you want to be able to relate to the masses, you can't use jargon on your podcast.
All right, Eric. Before I ask my last question, what is the easiest way for people to find you?
You can find my podcast at don'tretiregraduate.com. And you can find our firm at bfgfa.com. That's BFG Financial Advisors.
All right. Question for you. What is the one thing everyone needs to do today to get in a better place for their future financial planning?
Eliminate debt, adverse debt. If there's one thing that's a killer of financial wellness, it is consumer debt. And here we are, holiday season plus or minus. People overspend this time of year anyway. And it's one thing to have a mortgage on a home or a business loan to start a company or some kind of leverage
on appreciating assets.
All debt isn't bad, but adverse debt, 401k loans are a disaster. Personal lines of credit are a disaster. It's okay to have access to working capital. Having a line of credit on your home is great for an emergency. It's not great to leave it there. That's not the point. But consumer debt is by and large always bad. And if you have debt, the first step is to plug the hole in the bottom of that bucket and stop taking on more debt. So first thing is stop spending more than you make. And the second thing is have a legitimate plan and an accountability partner to get out of it, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a next door neighbor. Have something or someone that is going to create a plan around that for you, because
I love it.
Otherwise people just won't do it. It's too painful. It
is painful, right? It's a good way to. It's one of those things we can get buried in and then not paying any attention to.
And like they say, if you're in a hole, first stop digging. Stop digging. Stop going to it used to be the department stores. Now it's get off of Amazon.
Yeah.
Unless you're buying my book on Amazon, then it's okay. But other than that, don't. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also goes back to the conversation of, people who are working those three jobs to just get by, like they're taking on debt because they have to in a lot of ways, like to eat or whatever. And that's sometimes. A whole, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's, there's people who can't, I would be interesting to see like the profiling of who has the debt.
Yeah. Sometimes it's because of that. A lot of times it starts with student debt, which is really a bill of goods we talked about this is not a guarantee of a better life or a better income or a better anything. In fact, it might be a lifetime of struggle.
Not anymore.
And so it starts with student debt, which is, I would argue that your education is not collateral. I mean, it's not. And maybe your education, some would say, oh, it's accretive, it's upwardly mobile, and yes, it's an investment, and maybe, but the ROI is not very good unless it is a top degree in a field that has that kind of predictability. The MIT folks we talked about, okay, I'll buy that.
Right.
But I was an English major, and I was fortunate to get out of school without loans because it was the early 90s and there wasn't as much of that. But if it had been 10, 15 years later with the costs the way it went, I would have borrowed money and I might still be paying for it.
Yeah. And that's, again, it's that bill of goods that you have to go to school. You have to spend all this money to actually like move up in the world.
That's right.
It's a huge issue.
It's going to get better for the next generation, but there's a whole group of folks they're stuck. They're stuck. You can't even bankrupt your way out of it. I mean, you're really stuck.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And you made those decisions before you were old enough to drink that bourbon. I don't get it. How can you make a $500,000 decision when you've never had a job?
I know. And that's the thing that just boggles my mind. Like, if they wanted to eliminate the student debt, I'd be like, please, by all means, we're all going to be better for it.
Well, I think there's lots of problems with that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the ant and the grasshopper.
Yeah, it is. The ant and the grasshopper.
Why punish the folks who either avoided it or paid it off?
Yeah, it was so expensive though. I mean,
I know.
What they pay now is just so expensive. Maybe they could just like do the math and be like, we're going to just eliminate what,
or
huge arbitrage.
Or create tax incentives or create some kind of match so that you're not giving up all accountability, but you're helping. I have no problem with helping people who are in that position. I think it's the right thing to do. Yeah. But to just wipe it out is teaching a lesson that you can borrow money and not pay it back, and that's not a good lesson.
I think it goes with that bill of goods, though, right? They were sold something fraudulent.
Maybe.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting conversation to have because I think people get like very like, and I'm like, but why does it matter if you're fine?
It is something I could lucidly argue either side in a debate.
Me too.
Which means that it's a good debate to have.
Yeah, I think it's a good debate to have. I think it is a very big issue when we're dealing with that adverse debt.
Agreed.
And the liquidity of people and what they have to do to get by. And yeah, I mean, I came out of school thankfully with not much debt because I worked. My parents were able to pay for my school and I paid my portion, which was a third of all my schooling and stuff. And I worked to make that happen and I was able to do that. But my friends who went and got masters right after me, a lot of them, their interest rates for their student debt, like between when my husband and I graduated in 2003 and when they graduated, a couple of years later, their interest rates and like the debt that they took on to do those master's degrees and things like that is it just boggles my mind how it changed so much in just a couple of years.
It hasn't gotten better yet,
Mm-hmm.
but that may be a reaction to COVID.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Because the need for sprawling campuses might feel less important now than the ability to get a good, solid education less expensively.
Yeah, there's lots of
and
good
even
ones.
if it's some hybrid model,
Yeah.
I think college as we know it had better evolve, or there will only be a handful left, and there'll be elite schools that have endowments.
Right.
Truly.
And there's a lot of kids like my son who like thrives on this hybrid model. He was in school 2 days and then he was online for 3. Now he's fully online and hopefully they're going back in a couple weeks. But he thrived in that model. The 7 days a week middle school model or some classes in a day model, that did not work for him. This hybrid block model, amazing for him.
It's interesting. My daughter's been in school all year. So she actually has been going to school, which I am thankful for. But when she was remote last spring, she did really fine.
Mm-hmm.
I know other parents whose kids, they can't.
My 10-year-old does not.
It's unfortunately, it's creating an amazing gap between those kids who have the right Wi-Fi and the right technology and the right parents being able to be home to help and the right, like, it has split the educational divide further than we had ever seen it. And it was already bad.
It was really bad. It's still bad.
It's worse.
Yeah, it's going to be worse.
Well, this is not uplifting. We need to end on an uplifting note. Tell me that the SALT redo is going to happen for S Corp owners in states where we're grossly overtaxed.
Just technical tax questions.
I want you to go on record saying that is actually going to happen, and then I want to send you all of my stuff so you can redo my returns for 3 years.
I'm expensive, just so you know.
And I'm willing to pay for it if I get that back.
So what Eric is talking about is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act created a limit on the SALT tax, which is your state and local taxes, so property taxes, sales taxes, things like that, to be deductible on your Schedule A. Yes. And what we're currently seeing is some potential legislation that would allow businesses to deduct
pass-through entities, S Corp specifically,
to deduct all that stuff or deduct those things that are business related at the business level instead of at the individual level where they are limited.
Done. You have a new client. Let's do
that. So that's what Eric is talking about. It's potential legislation. I don't generally weigh in on that stuff. I think that there is enough pull in enough states to potentially make this happen. That SALT limitation created issues in a lot of places with higher property taxes, which is generally the East Coast and the West Coast. That's where we see some of the higher property taxes. But it's very interesting to talk about like effective like tax rates that are not, federal taxes or state taxes. Every state has their own taxes. But this is also something we do through planning with C Corps, is how much are we limited? And can we create a C Corp to get some of those taxes over there?
I just think everyone listening to this show should have CPA envy.
Okay.
Truly, they should all want you as their CPA.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I always say that taxes are puzzles. There's my friend Juan, actually, who I interviewed earlier today. He was like, it's like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I'm like, it really is.
Yes.
There's no one size good fits all, but
it's 1,000 pieces. But Congress keeps hiding some of the pieces.
Yeah.
If you do a 1,000-piece puzzle and 7 pieces are in the couch cushions and you can't find them, you're not satisfied. If you don't have that 1,000th piece, it's the worst experience ever. You just spent a month putting this thing together.
Yeah. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a huge shift in how we plan and how we do things. But people keep asking me, well, should we just wait to plan until, Biden makes changes or whatever? And I'm just like, they're just going to keep making changes and we're just going to keep changing how we plan. That doesn't, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out.
Well, you're absolutely right. And if that comes to fruition, I'm going to do a jig. It's going to be epic. I'll even do
We'll
it on
see.
your show if you want.
We'll see. It'll be
Okay.
interesting. I need to go read some more about it. I started reading about it and then I was like, oh, it's potential legislation. I try not to spend a whole lot of time on potential legislation because then I get confused.
Well, I agree with you, except when it's going to impact me and so many of our
I get it.
colleagues and clients
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
that I have a rooting interest on legislation, which I also know better than to do.
Yeah. We have
Because then you run the risk of getting your hopes dashed.
Right.
So if you're an S Corp owner and you're listening to this and you're in a high tax state and you're rooting for this, don't go spend the money. You might not get it back.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
And don't go prepay stuff. I love
Nope.
when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act people are like, go prepay stuff.
No,
I'm like,
no.
that's not going to work.
Don't do it.
Don't even bother standing in line.
Correct.
And then people were mad and I was like, it wasn't me that told you to do that. It was your other tax person who's not paying attention.
Just remember that when we pay high taxes, it's our CPA's fault. Always.
It's your lack of planning fault, right?
Incorrect.
Just like,
I blame my accountant in every single case.
I always tell people, you can throw me under the bus. That's fine. You can invoke my name to get stuff done.
Well, just, at the end of the day, when I get really upset about my tax bill, the person on the receiving end of that is always my CPA.
Which is
who's
why
like,
we do tax projections.
he's like,
every
buddy,
year.
I totally get it. I'm sorry. You made money and you should stop doing that.
Is that what he said?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I say that.
From the safety of a telephone call, he says that.
No.
Say if he was sitting here.
We do tax projections for all of our clients every single year because I don't want to have that conversation.
I know.
I'd rather have it now than like in April because I don't like to make those phone calls.
We'll forget.
Well,
your clients will forget.
That has happened. And I'm like, remember that conversation we had on October 14th?
Nope.
And they're like,
I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday.
They're like,
I sure as heck don't remember.
They're like, no, I blocked it out,
Mhm.
but I do acknowledge that you did tell me.
you may have said a little something, but I wasn't listening and I didn't understand it anyway. And you promised it would be okay, and it's not.
I rarely do that. Okay. Awesome, Eric. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh man, this was such fun. It was good to see you. And it's always fun to talk taxes and to talk bourbons and to talk literature and
who knew taxes could be fun.
We can talk 18th century romantic poetry anytime you want. I'll even quote some.
That's not even in my wheelhouse at all. So we're going to skip that one.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.